Are you planning to study in the US, but the visa process is giving you sleepless nights? Then this is the session for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official channel of GMAT Club. My name is Dipesh, and I'm going to be your host for the day. In today's session, we have Travis Feuerbacher, a former US visa officer with the Department of State and licensed US immigration attorney. He'll be walking us through the process of getting the visa and answer your questions so that you can get your visa without any hurdles. Hello, Travis. Welcome to the GMAT Club, and thank you for being a part of this session.
Thanks, Dipesh. It's an honor to be here.
Glad to have you here. So, Travis, shall we go ahead with the presentation and just speak about the process of getting the visa right from the admit?
I think that's a great idea. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I've got a couple of slides that I'll run through. And then, as you mentioned, Dipesh, I want to make sure we save as much time as possible for questions and answers, because I think that's why most of you are here. So yeah, thanks for the short introduction. I'll add a little bit to that. So as Dipesh mentioned, I'm Travis Feuerbacher. I was a career diplomat with the US State Department, which is essentially our foreign ministry in the United States. I did that for almost 7 years. And for most of that time, I was a visa officer, which means that I interviewed tens of thousands of visa applicants from all over the world. Many of those were students, and I have obviously issued my fair share of student visas, but I've also denied my fair share of student visas. And so now I've dedicated my career to helping visa applicants navigate through the process with a particular focus on the visa interview itself, because that's where I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people don't really know what to expect or how they might prepare. So while I was at the State Department, I did manage a non-immigrant visa section for a while. I managed an American Citizen Services section. This is where we protect Americans abroad. If you're an American citizen and you get arrested or you get injured or maybe you die or you need to renew your passport, that's where we get involved. And then finally, I managed a fraud prevention unit. So we were tasked with investigating potential visa and passport fraud, which was a pretty interesting job, but it also gave me some insight on some common questions and concerns that visa officers have that they would ask me to go a little bit deeper on. So now I am back in the private sector. I am a US immigration attorney, as Dipesh mentioned, and I'm working with my partner at ZF Visa and Immigration. So as I mentioned, we are mainly focused on the visa interview, although we do have some services that kind of span the entire visa application cycle. So for the visa interview itself, we can help our clients or visa applicants prepare for the interview, understand what to expect. We will run through some practice interview questions, offer some coaching, and then we'll provide additional assistance with especially complicated cases. So if you have any specific questions and you would like to run them by a qualified immigration attorney who actually has experience, on the other side of the visa window, head over to our website after this session to zfvisa.com or send us an email when you have a chance to info@zfvisa.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. So before we continue, just a quick disclaimer. This webinar, this session is not meant for me to offer legal advice. I really can't offer specific legal advice unless I know a lot more details about your circumstances. And I really don't want anybody here to go into a lot of their private details because this is a public forum that's being recorded. So if you do have specific questions, reach out to a qualified immigration lawyer. Don't rely on information you find online or something you heard from a relative or a friend. Go to a qualified source that really knows what they're talking about. And of course, I'd be happy if you come to us. So with that, what I want to go through very quickly before we open this up to Q&A are a couple of things. First, I want to focus on the end-to-end F1 visa process. What are the main kind of general steps you should expect to go through to get your US visa and then ultimately travel to the United States to begin your studies? Then I'll go through a little bit of what you might expect at your visa interview. Again, this is kind of a complicated and scary time. It's a major milestone in your educational journey. So I'll lift the veil a little bit and give you some insight into how you might prepare. And then we'll open it to your questions, and I will provide as many answers as I can. So the general end-to-end process to get your F1 student visa, I think of this in 5 general buckets or 5 general steps. You're going to start where I'm guessing many of you are today, in applying to schools. Now, in the United States, we generally will apply to multiple schools because we know we may not get into, that dream school. And so we like to have a couple of fallback options. You may be thinking of the same thing, or maybe you're just going all in on a school. Regardless, when you get an offer of acceptance, or maybe a few offers, before you make a decision, it's very crucial at this step to think about how you're going to pay for all of the expenses. The school itself will probably be expensive, but then you have to think about how you're going to pay for rent, how you're going to buy food. Will you need a car? Will you need to pay for gasoline, maintenance on that car, and everything else? And come up with a plan. Make sure you have enough money to fund the entire educational program, whether it's 1 year, 4 years, or maybe more. Because when you ultimately get to your visa interview, this will be a key consideration that the visa officer is thinking about. So let's assume that you've decided on a school. You have a plan to pay for your education. The next step is largely facilitated by the school you choose. So your school will generally register you in a government database, which is called the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS for short. We'll post a link to more details about some of these different government programs in the description below. So don't worry about furiously writing this down at this point. But the SEVIS program is essentially an automated online government database that stores information about all international student participants that are studying in the United States. Once you're registered in that program, your school will be able to issue you what's called an I-20 form. That form is basically proof that you've been admitted to a school. It'll have some details about how much the school is expected to cost, whether you need to know English before you start, when the school program begins, and many other things. You'll have to pay a fee called the I-901 fee. And again, we'll post a link to that as well. And before you move forward, check that I-20 form. Make sure all the details are accurate, because this will be an important document as you move through your journey. We'll come back to that. So now you've chosen a school. You've gotten your I-20 form. The next step of the journey is really where your visa experience will begin. And that starts with an online application form. It's what we call the DS-160. So again, we'll post a link to that in the description below as well. But when you go to this form, a couple of things to think about. This process to fill out the form can take a long time. Generally speaking, you should budget probably an hour to maybe an hour and a half, and you should do this yourself. It's very common practice in many parts of the world to hire a visa agent or an agency to fill these forms out for you. This can be dangerous because when you submit this form, you're essentially certifying that every answer provided is true. And if there's any discrepancies when you get to your interview between something you answered and a discussion you have with your visa officer, or a discrepancy between an answer in the form and information the visa officer has on their computer screen, you're not doing yourself any favors. It's going to hurt your credibility, and it may lead to a denial of your application. So fill the form out yourself, take as much time as you need, and check everything to make sure it's accurate. Because after you submit the form, you can't go back and change anything. So you've now submitted your application form. The next step is to schedule your visa interview. The visa interview, we're not going to spend a lot of time on here because we'll focus on that in the Q&A that we host. But the visa interview is the most crucial step of this journey. You may have just a couple of minutes in front of the visa officer, and that is your only opportunity to establish credibly that you're a real student intending to study in the United States. So preparation is key here. And this is where we come in. This is where we help visa applicants put their best foot forward to maximize their chance of success. And that's what I want to focus on for the rest of this seminar. Now, the last step, let's assume that you were approved at your visa interview, and I hope you will be. The last step is to travel to the United States. Keep in mind that there are a couple of limitations. You can only enter the country within 30 days of what's called the program start date, which is listed on your I-20 form. If you try to enter the United States any earlier, they may not let you in, and it may cause other complications down the line. The other quick tip here is make sure you bring your I-20 form with you. Don't check it in a suitcase if you're taking a plane, because you'll need that physical piece of paper to actually get into the country. If you don't have it with you, that could delay your entry and cause other problems. So this is the end-to-end process. This is a very general overview. There are many nuances. Different schools may have slightly different practices. Different embassies and consulates may have different ways that you go about scheduling your visa interview and paying requisite fees. So I urge you to go to the official government websites that we're providing to go through the exact steps that you'll need to follow and make sure you understand how everything's going to work. And then B, reach out to the designated school official or DSO at the school you choose. The DSO will be your main ally as you navigate through this process. They'll be able to answer any questions you have about, can you work? What job might you be able to do? What if you need to extend your education? What if your grades aren't very good? What happens? The DSO should be your best ally, and you should schedule some one-on-one time with them as soon as you can, just to establish a relationship. So with that, I'm not sharing this to scare anybody. This is really just to illustrate how important the interview is. So last year, in 2023, over 1 in every 3 student visa applicants were either denied or they faced significant delays in their student visa application. That's a staggering number. And I can tell you from experience as a visa officer that I encountered many student applicants that really may qualify, they may have qualified, but they presented themselves so poorly and they were so unprepared that I didn't feel confident enough that they were truly planning to study in the United States, and I was left with no option but to deny their application. And so I personally think that this refusal rate is too high. I think if people know what to expect and they adequately prepare, they will be in a much better position. So what should you expect at your interview? Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have just a couple of minutes in front of the visa officer. Visa officers may interview up to 250 people in a single day. And so they don't have enough time to, relax and chit chat with you. They also don't have a lot of time to try to get necessary details out of you. So if they ask you a question, make sure you answer it and make sure you give them details. Don't just give one-word answers. Don't try to hide things that you're a little embarrassed about. Be yourself, be honest, and answer their questions. The visa officer may look at you right in the eyes during the interview. And that's probably an exercise in trying to see if you look credible, if you look like you're telling the truth. But the officer also may not look at you at all. They may be looking at their keyboard. They may be looking at their computer monitor. And so just expect that it could kind of be anywhere on that spectrum. You may also encounter some wacky, unexpected questions. When I was a visa officer, I would commonly encounter student applicants who would come to my window and just immediately go into a rehearsed speech. That doesn't tell me anything about you. It doesn't tell me if you're genuine. It doesn't tell me, what you're planning to do. All it tells me is that you've memorized something that maybe somebody else told you to memorize. And so if that happened, I would almost immediately stop the applicant. I would interrupt them. And I know that probably was a little rude, but I don't have a lot of time. So I would interrupt them and ask them a random question. And that was meant to try to trip them up, to get them to be genuine, to be real. And so if that happens to you, just know that it's part of the process and try not to be totally caught off guard. Documents are another big question that we often get. There are many documents that might help you during your interview. There's some documents that are required, like your passport, your I-20 form, but there's other documents that are optional, like transcripts from a previous degree or proof that you can pay for the educational program in the United States. I would recommend that you bring all of these. Just know that the visa officer may not want to see anything because documents are easily falsified, which is exactly why the United States requires an in-person, face-to-face interview for almost every visa applicant. And then finally, you should expect a decision at your interview. Unless the officer has some lingering questions or may need some additional documents, you should expect to understand, to know whether you've been approved or denied right there. So again, this is a big deal. I understand that you're probably going to be nervous, but that's why preparation is key. And so I do urge everybody after this seminar to go take a look at our YouTube channel, ZF Visa. We have many videos that are specifically related to students. We have videos that are more general for non-immigrant visas. We have explanations of what a denial under 214B means and all sorts of other things. So go and take a look at that. And then finally, we're very excited to announce that coming very soon, we will be launching a self-service guide, comprehensive guide, I should say, to the entire F1 visa process. This has been completed and compiled by former visa officers and licensed U.S. immigration attorneys. And what we've done is we've taken all of our experience interviewing visa applicants and then working with visa applicants to help them through the process. And we've distilled everything into a digestible yet comprehensive overview that will be available at your convenience as you prepare for your visa. So if you're interested in hearing more about this and being notified when this goes live, head over to our website, zfvisaguides.com, and sign up for our mailing list. We'll notify you as soon as it's ready. So with that, let's go into some Q&A, and I'm going to get rid of my screen here. There we go. Dipesh, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Travis. That indeed was a very comprehensive overview of the whole process of getting a visa. I wish I had some session like this, so I would have been like a little bit more stress-free, and I would have saved myself some time as well. Yeah.
In all fairness, though, Dipesh did just get his F1 visa, and Dipesh, you had no trouble, did you?
No, I did not have any trouble. Thankfully, it was quite exciting, and it was like quite smooth. I would say that my whole process from entering the consulate until getting approved, it was, I think, around 10 minutes, 12 minutes. It didn't take me a lot of time. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yes. So your visa process could be as smooth as this. And I would just second the thing that Travis mentioned, that yes, we need to have all the documents in person so that if our visa officer requires any document, we are able to furnish those. Yeah.
Dipesh, did your officer ask for any documents?
So my visa officer asked me just for I-20 and DS-160. So I had a file, a folder of all the documents that I needed to show, but unfortunately or fortunately, she didn't ask me any document.
Yep, that's pretty typical. But had you gone to the interview with nothing, of course, the officer would have asked for a lot of things, and then you would face a delay. So it's better to be prepared for sure.
Exactly. Okay, so for all the viewers, we are gonna take your questions in a while. In the meantime, please do like, share, and subscribe this video. And before moving to the live questions and answers, we have compiled a list of around 10 FAQs which are most frequently asked, and we would want to address those. So here's the first question. I'm an Indian citizen and I live in India. Can I travel to another country like UAE or Thailand to get my visa?
The short answer is yes, of course. You can apply anywhere in the world. The longer answer is we always advise our clients to apply in their home country. And the reason for that is you're going to encounter a visa officer that has been living and working in your home country for a while. They probably have been trained to speak your local language and they understand your customs. They're used to seeing your passport, your mannerisms. And so if you go to a different country, chances are very slim that you'll encounter somebody that speaks your language, unless you speak very good English. But then you're going to show up with a different color passport or a different, style of passport. You may have different customs, mannerisms. And so you're automatically subjecting yourself to a little bit more scrutiny. And so it's just easier and it's generally smoother to apply in your home country if you can.
Sure. I just want to mention one experience here, like my personal experience. So I am an Indian by citizen and I applied for my visa in Germany because I've been living here for quite some time now and it's for work. And as I shared earlier, I didn't face any problem. So if you are already living somewhere, probably it's a good option to just apply there if you get a visa appointment there.
Absolutely. And sometimes you may face a really long wait before you can even schedule an interview. And so you may not have an option. But if you go outside of your home country, you may get a question about, why are you here in Germany when you're from India? And so if you have a good answer to that, it's, I'm living here and working here, or I couldn't get an interview in time, or, whatever that is. Just make sure you have kind of a response if that question comes up.
Sure. So moving on to the second question. What happens if my visa is rejected?
Well, it really depends on why your visa was rejected. So most visa rejections are made pursuant to what's called 214B, which is a section of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. What 214B says essentially is that you didn't convince the visa officer that you qualified for the visa. You start out essentially from a presumption that you're guilty, that you don't qualify. And so it's your job to convince the officer that you do qualify. So if you get refused under 214B, you can reapply at any time. It's not that big of a deal. But the nuance here is that a previous refusal will be noted in the visa officer system. So when you go back to reapply the next time, the officer may ask you what happened the first time. They may ask you something like, what in your circumstances changed? Because we already made a decision last time that you didn't qualify. And so it gets a little bit more complicated every time you get refused, which again, Depesh, is why I always say, prepare as much as possible for the first interview, because it's your only opportunity to make that good first impression.
Okay. So one question here, Travis. So if someone's visa is rejected, would they get to know the reason in detail, or like how is it notified?
Unfortunately, they probably will not be given a detailed reason. And this is something that I never really liked as a visa officer. I really wanted to tell somebody why I didn't approve their application. But visa officers are reluctant to do that. Because if they give a detail, if they give a concrete reason why they didn't approve an application, then the concern is that the applicant will just go and lie about whatever that issue was to address that concern so that they'll get issued the next time. So it's essentially a way to kind of protect the integrity of the process to only say you didn't qualify under 214B. And that's another thing that we often help our clients with, is to just understand what the concerns might have been and then help them to honestly and credibly address those concerns when they go back. But it's an art more than a science, I would say.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'll show the other question. What are some common reasons for rejections?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that somebody might be rejected, but I would say the most common reason, honestly, is that you don't appear to be telling the truth. A big part of this process, and again, the reason that the United States requires this in-person interview is to see if you're actually credible. Because there's a lot of reasons that somebody might try to get to the United States. You may be trying to work here. You may be trying to just, live here with your family, whatever your motivation is. And so the officer's main job is to figure out if you're really a student. Are you planning to come to the United States, enroll in class, complete your program, get your degree? And if you don't appear to be credible, if you don't appear to be telling the truth, then there's no way you can convince the officer that you're going to comply with the requirements. Beyond honesty, I think lack of preparation is the other main issue. Student applicants, especially that came to my window, who couldn't answer some basic questions about their school and their plans, that doesn't really convince me that they're a real student. It's a major decision to move to a foreign country, to enroll in class, maybe in a foreign language that isn't your native language, to be away from your support system, your friends and your family. And so if you can't really explain how you arrived at that decision, why you chose a particular school, why you chose a particular major, then it's going to be very difficult to approve your application. So prepare to talk about your plans and prepare to go into some details about how you came to this conclusion, this decision, and you're going to be in a much better position. So I think that's really it, Dipesh. It's lack of honesty and lack of preparation. Kind of under that, there were always concerns about, can you actually pay for this program? Maybe you've had really bad grades in the past. And so there was kind of a concern that you're not really going to, take this seriously and graduate. But beyond that, it's really all over the place.
So basically, honesty is the best policy here. So we have
Absolutely.
to be very honest about our details and information in the TS-160 form as well as during the visa interview.
And, I always tell people that the visa officer has access to an overwhelming amount of data. And so it really isn't going to be in your best interest to try to hide something that maybe you're embarrassed about or try to lie about something. Assume that the visa officer already knows about that issue. And so it's really an exercise in, can you be honest about it? Can you own up to it and then move forward?
Okay. All right. So with that, moving on to the next question. I'm an admitted student. What kind of visa do my partner and children need?
It's a great question. So I'm going to assume that you are going to study on an F1. There are other types of student visas, but F1 is the most common. So if that's the case, then your spouse and minor unmarried children may qualify for what's called an F2 visa. A couple of things to think about. They will need an I-20 form. They don't have to pay that SEVIS fee that the main F1 student would have to pay. Each of them will have to fill out a separate DS-160 application, and they will each need to schedule an interview. One tip here that we always tell our clients is the student should interview first, because you're going to have to, again, pay a fee for each interview slot. So if the student is not approved, then now you've just wasted several hundred more dollars for your spouse and your children, who will also be refused if you don't have a student visa. So you should apply first, and then if and when you're approved, then your family should go in and apply for their F2 visas.
Okay. All right. So the next question, what is the usual visa processing time?
This will very much depend on the embassy or consulate where you apply. I think very, very generally speaking, expect roughly a week. Some embassies, some consulates will process the visa the same day. You might even be able to pick your passport with your visa stamp in it that day. Others may process it in a couple of days, and then it may go to other location like a post office or somewhere else for you to pick it up. So ask the staff at the post where you interview and check online. Every embassy and consulate will have details about this on their website so that you know what to expect.
Sure. So just a follow-up question on this. So usually, let's say someone's classes are starting or they have to be in the USA by end of July or the first week of August. So when is the latest they can apply for the visa or have a visa appointment?
So I think as a rule of thumb, you should apply as early as you can. I mentioned earlier that you can enter the United States up to 30 days before that program start date as listed on your I-20. So apply, several months in advance if you can, and then you have nothing to worry about. If worse comes to worse and you're rejected, then you can even apply again and you have enough time. If you're running up on a short clock, there's a couple of things that I would consider. I would give myself at least a good 2 weeks if I could. I generally don't tell people to buy a plane ticket until they have a visa, because again, they may not be approved and then they've just wasted money on a plane ticket. There's other considerations too. You'll probably want to rent an apartment and make other preparations. So give yourself at least a couple of weeks, and then if even if you're approved, there could be some delays and you're not going to miss the beginning of class. Yeah, I think that's the best advice. One other question, Depesh, that comes up here quite often is, what if I can't get an interview in time? Almost every embassy and consulate will have a method for student visa applicants specifically to request an expedited interview slot. So again, check the website of the embassy or consulate where you intend to interview. And generally what you'll have to do is schedule an interview. It may be months down the line, and then contact the post to request that interview is expedited. So again, now you're giving yourself more of kind of a buffer in case something goes wrong or something's delayed.
Okay, all right. That's really helpful, in fact. Especially, like, I just saw a comment here, like someone said that in India, almost all the consulates in India have a waiting time of around 270 plus days. So how do we go about with that visa appointments during such situations?
Yeah, this is an issue at many posts, and I can tell you from experience, starting from about now through middle to end of the summer, we would open up, consistently open up more slots for student visa applicants, because we know that you're on a clock and you really, you can't be late for class. So one thing is to reach out to your embassy or consulate, but another thing is just to keep checking the interview availability every day, sometimes twice a day, because more slots might be opened up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds quite reassuring, I would say.
Yeah, I hope so. All is not lost.
Yeah. Okay, with that, to the next question. Can I work part-time in the US on my F1 visa? Can I work remotely for a job in my home country?
Good question. This is really complicated, so I won't go in, to excruciating detail here. I think first and foremost, talk to the designated school official, the DSO at your school. They're very adept at helping you navigate through the different regulations that are in place, for whether or not you can work and where you can work and what you can do for work. I will say, generally speaking, there are opportunities to work. Generally, that work needs to be somehow related to your, degree or study program. During the first year of school, you're generally only allowed to work on campus. And so that could be at a cafeteria, in a library, something like that. And then starting from your second year, you have a bit more option. Again, check with your DSO. And the last part of that question was, can I work remotely for a job in my home country? That is not allowed. And just, for what it's worth, the reason the United States has so many restrictions on whether you can work and what kind of job you can have is because there is an overriding interest in making sure you're going to class, making sure you're passing your class. Because, if you start failing classes and you fall way behind because you're more focused on a job, then you are more likely to be out of status. Maybe you stop going to school altogether. Maybe you start violating the terms of your student visa. And the United States doesn't want that to happen. So no, you cannot work outside of these kind of narrowly allowed circumstances, and check with your DSO for more details.
Absolutely. Okay. So the next question, I am a foreign national who already holds a degree from the US. How does that impact my chances of getting another F1 visa?
This is actually more common than you would think. And so what I would say here is, as a visa officer, we're going to try to determine whether you're what we would call a progressing student. Are you showing a progression through your educational journey? Or are you just kind of a lifetime professional student that's using school as an excuse to be in the United States. So, we'll look at things like your transcripts. Are you passing your classes? Or are you trying to go to a different, master's degree or a different undergraduate degree because you keep failing? Well, that's a sign that you're not really a student. You're working or doing something else. The other question that we would have is, why are you getting another master's degree? Is this just more school for the sake of more school? Or again, is there a progression? You got maybe an MBA to start, and now you're trying to get a more specialized master's degree, maybe in data analytics or, finance or something that's going to help you progress in your career. That's a really credible, clear plan. And you've made some clear considerations to go into that, second similar degree. And so I think if you're getting another degree, another kind of same level degree, just expect to be asked a few extra questions and be able to articulate why you've made that decision beyond just, I want to be in the United States. I want to go sit on the beach in California, because that's not really going to do it.
I'm going to be honest here. I had never thought that all these things go behind the wall. And I was like, okay, probably I'm just applying for another visa, so I should get it quite easily. But now I know, okay, if I have to again apply for a visa, I have to be very careful about all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So the next question is, how do I renew my F1 visa?
So the easiest thing to do would be maybe while you're at home in the summer or over a holiday break visiting family, ahead of time, schedule a visa interview and go in to renew your visa. There are many circumstances where you would not actually need to physically appear for an interview again. Check with the embassy or consulate where you intend to renew, and you can find those details. You can also renew your visa or extend your visa while you're in the United States as well. Your DSO can help you through that process, and it's not super difficult. The main consideration, by the way, here is, are you, again, progressing as a student? So I've had many students come in to renew their visa, and they've got a GPA of 0. They've failed all their classes. Well, that just tells me that you're not going to class. You're not really a student. And so that raises significant concerns. Now, on the other hand, if you're passing classes, you don't need a perfect 4.0 grade point average. You don't need to be making top marks in every class. But as long as you're showing me that you're moving forward towards completion, towards a degree, then I'm not really that worried. So keep that in mind, as you prepare to renew your visa.
Okay, that's really helpful. The next question, okay, a lot of people wonder about this thing. What kind of errors are permissible in the DS-160 form? Can I submit a new DS-160 form after booking a visa appointment?
Yeah, this is a tough one. First of all, once you submit your DS-160, you can't go and change anything. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier. When you submit the form, you're certifying that everything in that form is correct. And so, there's literally no way to go in and change an answer. But typos happen, mistakes happen, omissions happen. Everybody understands that. So you may have some options available to you. First, if you encounter a mistake or an omission or some other error in your DS-160, immediately go to the website of the embassy or consulate where you plan to apply. Every post is different. Some will give you kind of a grace period where maybe you can submit a new DS-160 and update the application ID number that you use to make your appointment. Other posts may not, be forgiving. And again, the only way to change your response is to submit a new DS-160, but you may have to schedule a new interview, and you may even have to pay the interview fee again. And so this is where I always remind people, review that form as many times as you can before you submit it. Don't hire somebody else to fill it out for you, especially if you're a student, because you should have access to a computer. You should be able to do this yourself. And it is super important that it's all correct. Just yesterday, I was working with a client who hired a visa agent to fill the form out on their behalf. They made several errors, several mistakes. They left out some key details, and the applicant was rejected at their interview because the officer said, "You're not credible. You lied on this form." And their position was, "But I didn't provide these answers." And, legally speaking, they did, because they certified that everything was correct when they submitted the form. So just be careful. Make sure you check it and try to avoid this situation when you get to the interview.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer. And the next question is going to be quite interesting, especially for people who are on waitlist or people who have recently got admitted to R2. So the question is, I've already got an admit from XYZ school. I've also got an I-20 and SEVIS ID. I've filled the DS-160 form and booked my interview appointment as well. However, I've just gotten off the wait list. So how does the visa thing work after that?
I can tell you from experience, I changed my decision right at the last minute for the university that I attended, because at the last minute I got a scholarship from a different school. So I'm living proof that this happens from time to time. So the unfortunate answer here is, when you fill out your DS-160, you have to enter your SEVIS number, the student and the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS number, from your I-20 form, which is specific to the school that you've been accepted into. So if you change your mind after you've submitted that DS-160, this goes back to the previous question, the only option you have is to submit a new DS-160 form with that new SEVIS number from your new I-20 for your new school. So here, again, check with the embassy or consulate where you plan to apply. See if there's an opportunity to update the application ID number that you use to book your interview with that new DS-160. And if not, you'll have to schedule a new interview and you may have to pay the fee again. I would not delay on this, because it is very important that you appear with the correct information. I have had applicants before that came to my window and said, "Yeah, my application form says this school, but I just changed my mind." And unfortunately, the only thing I could do is say, you're going to have to apply. You're going to have to schedule another interview with the correct details. Okay. So I wish I could offer a better answer there, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, this still is very helpful, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who would be in the similar situation, because a lot of my friends are on waitlist and are waiting to hear back from the school, and maybe they'll be hearing back by May or early June potentially, so they'll have an idea of how to proceed in that case.
Here's one quick tip, Dipesh. You don't have to finalize your DS-160 and submit it to schedule your interview. From the time you start your DS-160 form, you actually have 60 days to complete it and submit it. So what I tell people is, start the form, you'll get that application ID number, go and schedule your interview, and then leave yourself another 4 or 5 weeks to see if that other school comes through. Then you can update that SEVIS number before you submit the form, and everything is correct when you get to your interview. So that's one thing you might consider.
That indeed is a very helpful advice. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find that helpful. Yeah. So with that, we are done with our FAQ questions, and I'll be now moving on to the live questions. Before that, I would urge all of you to like the video, share it, and subscribe to GMAT Club. So I'll just scroll through the questions. Yeah. We have a question. Does not showing financial support documents for second year of a study result into visa rejection or increase the risk of it?
It could increase the risk of it. Documents are generally not going to be required, but if the visa officer has some reason to question whether you can pay for your program, it's always best to have those documents ready, because that will answer the question. Now, when I was a visa officer, I don't think this would have led me to just outright refuse somebody. What I might have done is put you into that pause that we call administrative processing and ask you to send some proof in to me. But it could increase your risk.
Okay. All right. So the next question from Tapan: do we need NOC from organization if we work with government of India, or let's say any government of any nation?
It depends. I think you should probably have it just in case. I'm not sure that it'll be required. It very much depends on your case. This is where I would say send an email to us or talk to a qualified immigration attorney, and they can give you a more definitive answer.
All right. So the next question is from Pooja. Hey, I called US Embassy and that directed me to USIEF. So my question is how USIEF helps us to prepare for visa interview process.
I think I would probably want to know what your question was, because I think it very much depends. Yeah, why did you call the U.S. Embassy, and then I could probably shed more light on that. I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, so Pooja, if you are still watching this, please drop more details about this, and we'll be happy to address this. The next question is from Umesh. Does university ranking correlate with visa acceptance? Also, how should student deal with higher cost of attendance from top-ranked universities?
This is a really good question, Umesh. And we actually just posted a video, I think this week, on our YouTube channel about this exact issue. So first of all, as long as your school can issue an I-20 form, that's all that's required. But what a visa officer will be thinking is the top-ranked schools are super selective. And so if you've been accepted to one of the top-ranked schools, it's really likely that you're a real student who's intending to study, because we all know that that school has done some extensive due diligence to, vet you. If you're applying to a school that's maybe lesser known or maybe not as selective, then you may be asked some additional questions while the officer tries to verify whether or not you're really a student. So that's where it kind of comes into play, but it's not necessarily a legal requirement. Now, the higher cost of attendance, financing is always going to be an issue. Even if you've been accepted to the best university in the world, if you can't pay for it, then you technically don't qualify for the visa. So no matter where you go, you should be prepared to, show proof that you can pay for your program.
Okay, that really answers the question, and that is helpful. The next question is from Ibrahim. I got a full scholarship in MFA film at GSU after 3 years of hunt. Congratulations, Ibrahim. Meanwhile, I worked on jobs and as freelancer as well. I did bachelor's in 2020 and have a gap of 3 years. Is this gap a problem for visa officer?
It's hard to say without knowing more details. I can give you a couple of hypotheticals here. If in that 3-year gap you've worked and now you have a good reason why you've decided to go back and get this MFA, I wouldn't be worried about it. If during that 3-year gap you did nothing but sit on the couch and wait for this application to be accepted, then you may need to answer some questions about that. One thing I want to say quickly about scholarships. Scholarships are amazing. Mention that you got a scholarship as early as possible in your interview, because it can go a long way towards establishing your credibility as a student, and it can help address any concerns the officer has about whether you can pay for your education.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that answer, Travis. Now the next question is quite interesting. I'll start my program on 29th July. I want to enter the US in mid-June to attend family event, which is more than 30 days before the school's start date. Any possible way without returning hometown?
Yeah, what you would have to do is get a student visa. A tourist visa, not a student visa, because you would be entering the United States more than 30 days before the program start date. There's a couple of nuances there. You may have to adjust your status in the United States from a tourist to a student. This is where I would say talk to an immigration lawyer, make sure you're doing it right. And there's also some potential, complications in the future if you go that route. So make sure you kind of understand ramifications before you make any decision.
Okay. All right. I hope this answers your question too. The next question we have from Divya. Does previous B2 tourist visa refusal on the grounds of Section 214B hurt my chances of getting F1 visa approved?
It could. And this kind of goes back to something we talked about a little bit earlier. Anytime you've been denied a visa, regardless of what kind of visa it is, that denial will be noted on your file, on your record in the system. So as you approach the visa window, the officer will see that you've been refused before. Yeah, it's a different kind of visa, but it still means that for some reason you didn't qualify. So I think you need to be prepared to talk about that, be honest about it. Don't try to hide the fact that you've been refused before. And make sure that you're prepared to talk credibly about your plans as a student now, because the officer may have, some additional concerns.
Okay. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Divya. So the next question, we have just submitting multiple financial documents of self or parents, such as term deposits or bank statements of multiple bank accounts and loan letter, increased risk of visa rejection despite all documents being legit.
No, I think it helps. But to be clear, the visa officer may not want to see any of this. I commonly encountered people who would show up to my visa window with a literal binder full of documents, and I didn't need them. So I would say, yeah, come prepared. I don't think it's going to hurt you, but just be prepared that the officer may not even need to see them.
Okay. All right. Next, we have a question. How do I get the reason why I have been denied the visitor visa, since the visa office do not usually state the reason why people are rejected?
This is a funny one. And I always kind of laughed a little bit. The DS-160 form, what they're referring to is the DS-160 form will say, have you been denied in the past? And if you say yes, it will say, state the reason why. Well, as we mentioned earlier, visa officers rarely give you a concrete reason why. And so I would see responses all over the place, people trying to guess why they were refused. I don't really think that I would recommend playing a guessing game here. I think it might be honest, write what you think happened, but it could be something as simple as, I'm honestly not sure. Or, maybe I didn't discuss, all the details around my plans. It could be something like that. Or the officer told me that I was refused pursuant to 214B, and leave it at that, because that's all you know. I have seen some applicants, dig a hole in this answer where they said something like, I was just fired from my job right before the interview. And I would look through their previous answers and they told me they had a job. And now I'm thinking, wait a minute, they lied to me, or the previous visa officer. And that's even worse. So this is a strange one. And honestly, if you don't know, you can say you don't know.
Okay. All right. Then the next question we have is from Mahika. Do we take original documents or document copies for degrees or transcripts, etc.?
Original transcripts and degrees are preferable. Some officers may even require originals. Copies are, easier to fake, easier to alter. And so if you can get the originals, I think that's what I would recommend. If you can't, or at least you can't get them, quickly, the officer may put your application on hold if they need the original copies.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Adrian. I am a B2 visa holder and currently living in USA with a TD visa. Any advice in order to exchange it for F1 visa?
Yeah, this is where I would say you should talk to an immigration lawyer. You'll have to go through a process likely that's called change of status. And that would go through a different government agency. You have to fill out some paperwork. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that could lead to some potential complications down the line as you try to apply for other visas. So it's best to reach out to an immigration lawyer and kind of explore your options.
Okay. All right. The next one, okay. We have from Shashank Mahajan. What if I have received the I-20 from one school, but thinking about joining another school now? Should I just get the I-20 from the second school and working through the visa process?
Yes, the DSO from both schools will help you through that. You'll essentially have to transfer your SEVIS registration from the first school to the second school, get the I-20 from the new school, and then make sure that is the information you use when you apply for your visa.
Okay. I have another question from Abbas. I got denied twice for my undergraduate and now I'm applying for my graduate. Would that be an issue?
It could be. It's certainly something that the officer will be aware of. I think you should probably be prepared to answer some questions about, what's happened since you applied for your undergraduate degree and now you're going for your graduate degree. And it really is going to depend on your circumstance here.
Okay. All right. The next question we have in two parts. So I'll just display the first part here. I got a visa stamp on my passport to South Africa to do a PhD, but I got a US opportunity to do a PhD of which I would get an assistantship that waived my tuition and covers my living expenses. Second part, I wanted to inquire. I hope the South Africa study stamp won't be an issue for me during my visa interview.
If you were at my window, it would not be. I might ask you about it, but it sounds like you have a good reason why you changed your mind. And so this is not something I would worry too much about. Congratulations on getting this acceptance and this offer, though. It sounds great.
Another question from Taruka. Will mentioning my spouse who's in the US on an F1 visa for a PhD program on my DS-160 as a relative affect my visa interview negatively if I've been accepted to the same university for a PhD?
The only thing that will definitely affect you negatively is if you don't mention your spouse. Chances are good that the visa officer will already know that your spouse, is in the US. And if they don't know immediately, they can find that out pretty quickly. And so, again, honesty is the only option. Answer all the questions in your DS-160 form, accurately and honestly. The visa officer may ask you about your spouse. They may ask you for transcripts or something else from your spouse. But the only thing that's definitely going to be bad is if you lie or try to cover this fact up. These are the types of questions that we often help our clients with, by the way. So feel free to send us an email and we can kind of help you through what to expect here.
Okay. So moving on to the next question. I have my tourist visa appointment in May, for which I had applied back in 2022. Meanwhile, I have decided to go for US Masters. Should I still get my tourist visa? Can I change my B2 appointment to F1?
That's a good question. It's going to depend on the post. So first, reach out to the embassy or consulate and see if there's an option to change it. You're probably going to have to submit a new DS-160 anyway. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's certainly no reason you can't have multiple visas. You could go ahead and get your tourist visa and then apply separately for a student visa if you want. And then, if maybe after your studies or before your studies, you wanted to go for a vacation or a holiday, you'd be able to do that. So you kind of have multiple options here.
Okay. Okay, great. Then Akshat, I hope this answers your question. Next we have from Mahika again. Could you share sample questions, basic questions we should prepare for?
This is tough. I wish I could, but the reason I really can't is because as you approach the window, the officer is going to do a couple of things. They're going to, look at the basic details on their screen about whether you've been denied before, things like that. Do you have a criminal record? But then they're going to be scrolling through the answers you provided on your I-20 form. And because, you only have a couple of minutes with the applicant, the officer is going to start thinking about the most important questions to ask. And so this basically completely depends on your unique circumstances. Rarely will a visa officer ask the same couple of questions of everybody. Wouldn't really make sense to do that. So I can't really tell you what to expect. But again, if you're interested in our help to prepare and we would ask you about your circumstance, send us an email and we can help you through that process.
All right. The next question, here we have from Sandeep. Does having a valid B1, B2 visa improve your chances of getting your F1 visa approved?
It could. One of the legal requirements, which is kind of less important generally to a visa officer's consideration, but one of the requirements for a student visa is that you have what's called a residence abroad that you have no intent of abandoning. And this is something we commonly refer to as ties to home. So essentially, this is a non-immigrant visa. The student visa does not entitle you to move to the US permanently. It only entitles you to go to the United States for education for a short period of time. And so if you've already had a tourist visa and you can show kind of a track record of short visits to the United States, and, i.e., you didn't move to the United States and stay here permanently, then that can help establish your credibility as a non-immigrant, which really can only help your chance of getting a student visa approved.
Okay, so I think we are beyond the time, Travis, but if you have a couple more minutes, I would say, can we take a few more questions? We can go in a rapid fire format and we can just keep the answers and questions quick. Okay,
Let's do rapid fire. I'm ready.
Yeah, so here starts the rapid fire. Okay, so do visa officers make a decisions based on GMAT or GRE score? Can a higher standardized test score have higher chances of approval?
I would say almost never. This really isn't that interesting. If you've been accepted to a school, you've had a sufficient score, we're more worried about the school and your plans.
Okay. The next question, if we have approved H-1B petition, but stamping is not done and never entered the US, and we apply for F1 visa, is the process difficult and how's the success rate? Can we move from H-1B petition to F1?
It's a totally separate process. You would have to apply separately, schedule a separate interview. Somebody may ask you, oh, I see you got an H-1B petition approved. So probably expect to explain why your plans changed. It's hard to give any more details beyond that without knowing more about your circumstance.
Okay. So Somdatta, if you need any further assistance, feel free to reach out to Travis. We have just added certain links in the description below, so you'll find a way to contact him. Yeah. And the next question, what percentage of getting visa in second attempt? So what is the success rate in second attempt after first denial?
This really depends on your circumstance. You may have a 0% chance, you may have a 100% chance, or anything in between. It could depend on anything and everything. So that's probably where you'd want to reach out to us.
Okay. Then we have, our existing B1, B2 visa holders eligible for a visa interview waiver?
Not likely. Student visas are a different visa class. And so it's likely that you will need an interview. Check with the embassy or consulate where you plan to apply and see what policies they have.
Okay. The next question from Mohammed. My wife is already in the US on J1 visa, but I'm applying for graduate program. Should I apply on J2 or F1 visa? How can it contradict from my aspirations?
I would recommend F1, but it's hard to kind of go into more detail without knowing more about your plans, your wife's situation. This is more of kind of a legal question anyway, so I'm reluctant to go into much detail here.
Okay.
Send us an email and we can go a little bit deeper.
All right. The next question from Abhinandan. Can my spouse who is on F2 visa work part-time as a consultant for a company in her home country while living in the US?
Possibly. She would need an authorization from the government. And then there are some additional restrictions. This is certainly where an immigration attorney could help navigate through that. And you could also talk to your DSO. They may have some guidance as well.
Okay. The next question from Abhinandan. I filled my DS-160 and paid my visa appointment fee, but have not yet got an interview date, but have realized my passport is expiring. So I've applied for a new passport now. How does that work out?
When you get your new passport, I would recommend that you just go ahead and file a new DS-160. You'll get a new application ID number and use that to schedule your interview. So then you're only using the most up-to-date details like passport number, expiration date when you go in for your interview.
Okay. Okay. The next question. Do I need I-20 to schedule appointment?
that kind of. You'll need an I-20 with a SEVIS number to complete your DS-160, and you need the DS-160 before you can appear for your interview. But you can schedule your appointment before you finalize the DS-160. So technically, I don't think you would need it, but I would recommend that you get the I-20 before you really go through anything, because if you don't have the I-20, there's no guarantee that you're really going to that school, and it might be a little more complicated.
Okay. One more question. Does having relatives in a different part of the US than where you're going to school help or hurt your chances of landing an F1 approval?
Very much depends on your circumstances. Again, be honest about this when you fill out your application, and you may be asked about it.
Okay. So I'm just trying to see if there is. Okay, so we have one question from Pooja regarding the US IEF. So I had called US Embassy initially when I just started my GMAT prep. So the embassy directed me for further guidance and support related to my prep and services.
Okay, yeah, the GMAT itself is not something that an embassy is going to get involved with. That's very much separate from the visa process. So that's probably why they directed you elsewhere. If you have questions more directly related to the visa, the interview, something like that, that's where they may have some guidance. Or again, you may want to talk to the DSO at your school or an immigration lawyer.
Okay, we are going to take 2 or 3 more questions. One is from Prasoon. Is Provident Fund good source to showcase finances?
Hard to say without knowing anything else about your situation. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's hard to say. It could be.
Okay. Then the next question, should master's program applicants carry only bachelor's transcripts or include school transcripts? Does having long hair leave a negative impression during interviews? Basically, how to present yourself.
Bring as many transcripts as you can. The officer may not want to see any of them, or they may only want to see more recent ones, but it'd be better to be prepared. Long hair certainly is not going to disqualify you. But this is a good opportunity, Dipesh, to talk about how you should present yourself. Present yourself, professionally. Don't wear a suit if you're super uncomfortable wearing a suit, because then you're going to be uncomfortable at your interview and you're going to be squirming around. But, don't show up with holes in your shirt and, having not showered or bathed for 2 weeks. Treat this as a serious milestone in your journey. And so, no, long hair is totally fine. But have some respect for the visa officer in the process, and you'll be in a better position.
Okay. So all of you guys now know how to just dress yourself up. The next one, if a parent is a permanent resident in the US, can it affect a person's F1 visa chances?
It could affect how the interview is conducted. It doesn't necessarily disqualify you. And so again, be honest about this fact in your application, and be honest about it if you're asked in the interview.
All right. So the last question of the session from Abisola. Do we need to demonstrate ties to our home country? Well, visa officer need to see proof students will return after studying.
This is a really good question. And it very much depends on your study plans, your situation, et cetera. What the law really requires is that you, again, have a residence abroad that you have no intent of abandoning. So think about 2 extremes. One extreme is your entire life is going to be in the United States. All of your family is there. You have nowhere that you live elsewhere. You have no job elsewhere. You have no friends elsewhere. That means that you probably have abandoned your residence outside of the US. Now, on the other hand, you've got extended family, you have a job waiting for you, you have social clubs, you own property, all outside of the United States. Well, that can go a long way to proving that you haven't abandoned your residence abroad. So you're probably not on either extreme. You're probably somewhere on this, continuum. That's what the visa officer is going to be more interested in. I think everybody understands that when you're going to school, your plans 4 years, 2 years down the line are not set in stone. Your overall goal might honestly be to try to get a job in the United States with a company that will sponsor you for an H-1B visa, for example. That's not going to disqualify you. So again, the bigger consideration is, do you have a life outside of the United States, or is everything here such that you're likely to never leave and be in violation of a visa down the line?
Okay, so with this question, we have reached to the end of our session today. I want to really thank you, Travis, for taking out time for this wonderful and quite insightful session. And I'm sure hundreds and thousands of people are going to find this session really insightful. If anyone needs any personal attention or suggestions or legal advice on their visa status or visa application, please reach out to Travis. We have shared the links in the description below. And thank you so much, Travis, once again for taking out time, and especially for overstaying for 11 minutes. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you so much to all the audience over here. We have received wonderful questions, and you have been a good sport. Please do like and share this video and subscribe to GMAT Club channel. Thank you.